When was the last time you saw, for example, a tree?
A tree? The last time I went to court in 1998, 8 years ago, I saw a tree. I was in a car and in a bus actually.
This prisoner is allowed just 1 hour a day to walk inside this small, empty cell, a space surrounded by cold concrete and silence. For him, this is the closest thing to the outside world she has seen in years. No open sky, no fresh air, no freedom, just a brief moment to move, to breathe, and to remember what life used to feel like before everything was taken away. What if I told you there's a prison in the United States so extreme that inmates can spend decades without touching another human being? A place where silence is weaponized, where isolation becomes punishment, and where time itself feels like it stops. A place so controversial that it has been compared to psychological torture. This is Pelican Bay State Prison, one of the most feared and debated prisons on the planet. And what you're about to hear is truly disturbing. Located deep in the remote forests of Northern California, just miles from the Oregon border, Pelican Bay isn't just a prison, it's a fortress built for control. Surrounded by wilderness, far from major cities, it was designed to be isolated from the outside world in every possible way. Built in 1989, this facility had one mission: to contain the most dangerous inmates in total lockdown. But here's the shocking part. Over time, it became something much more extreme than anyone expected. Inside Pelican Bay lies one of the most infamous prison units ever created, the Security Housing Unit known as the SHU. And this is where things take a dark turn. Inmates inside the SHU spend between 22 and 24 hours a day completely alone. No physical contact, no conversations, no human interaction. Food is passed through a small metal slot. Even exercise happens alone, in a small concrete yard surrounded by high walls, often described as a dog cage. Now imagine this, not for a day, not for a week, but for years. Some prisoners have spent 10, 20, even over 30 years in this kind of isolation. Decades without a handshake, decades without a hug, decades without even looking another human being in the eyes. That's not just punishment, that's psychological endurance at its absolute limit. The cells themselves are designed for maximum control and minimum comfort. Solid steel doors, thick concrete walls, no windows to the outside world, artificial lights that can stay on almost all the time, surveillance cameras watching constantly. Inmates describe it as living inside a concrete tomb. No sunlight, no fresh air, just silence. And your own thoughts slowly getting louder. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Experts and psychologists have warned for years that this level of isolation can cause severe mental damage. We're talking about anxiety so intense it becomes unbearable, hallucinations that feel completely real, depression so deep that some inmates lose all sense of time and identity. In extreme cases, prisoners begin to talk to themselves, forget how to communicate, or even lose touch with reality entirely. But how do you even end up in a place like the SHU? You might think it's only for the most violent criminals, the worst of the worst, but the truth is far more controversial. Many inmates were sent to the SHU not for committing violent acts inside prison, but for suspected gang affiliation. That means no new crime, no trial, no jury, just suspicion, sometimes based on tattoos, letters, or even the word of another inmate. Think about that for a second. Your life could be placed in extreme isolation, not because of something you did, but because of what authorities believe you might be connected to. And it gets worse. For years, one of the only ways out of the SHU was to become an informant. In other words, betray other inmates and provide information. Imagine the pressure. Your freedom depends on turning against others, in a system where trust is already non-existent. And then came the breaking point. In 2011, something unprecedented happened. Inmates at Pelican Bay decided they had enough. They launched a massive hunger strike. Hundreds refused to eat, risking their health and their lives. But it didn't stop there. The movement spread across California. By 2013, over 30,000 prisoners joined the hunger strike statewide. Let that number sink in. Tens of thousands of inmates refusing food, all to protest one thing: long-term solitary confinement. This wasn't just protests. This was desperation at its highest level. Some prisoners went weeks without eating. Their bodies weakened, their health deteriorated, but they kept going, sending a message that the world could no longer ignore. And the world did notice. Human rights organizations across the globe began to speak out. Reports describe Pelican Bay as one of the most extreme examples of isolation in modern prisons. Even the United Nations stepped in. in, stating that prolonged solitary confinement could be considered a form of torture. That's right, torture, a word usually associated with war zones and dictatorships, now being used to describe a prison system. This sparked a massive debate. On one side, critics argued that no human being should be subjected to such extreme isolation for years or decades. They claimed it destroys the mind and strips away basic human dignity. On the other side, supporters argued that facilities like Pelican Bay are necessary to control dangerous inmates and prevent violence inside prisons. So the question becomes unavoidable. Where do we draw the line between security and humanity? After years of pressure, protests, and legal battles, change finally began to happen. In 2015, the state of California agreed to major reforms. Thousands of inmates were released from the SHU. Policies were changed to limit indefinite solitary confinement. New systems were introduced to evaluate who truly needed to be in isolation. For many prisoners, it was the first time in years, even decades, that they experienced something as simple as talking to another human being face to face. Imagine that moment. After years of silence, hearing a real voice again. After years of isolation, standing near another person. For some, it was overwhelming. For others, it was life-changing. But even with these reforms, the debate didn't end. Critics argued that the damage has already been done for many inmates, and that the system still has serious flaws. Today, Pelican Bay remains one of the most intense and controversial prisons in the world. A place built on control, isolation, and fear. A place that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Is this justice? Or has punishment gone too far? Because behind every steel door, behind every concrete wall, there is still a human being, and their story is far more complex than we often imagine. And here's the most chilling part of all. This isn't just history. The effects of what happened in places like Pelican Bay are still being felt today. The psychological scars, the debates, the unanswered questions, all of it continues. If this shocked you, you're not alone. Stories like this reveal a side of the world that many people never see, but absolutely need to understand. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if it gets a lot of support, I'll be uploading daily content about prisons and their darkest secrets.